Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani back in the house. I am back from vacation, feeling rested and recharged. Got a little cold on vacation. My son got a little sick. His first to second cold, they kind of blended together. We had some herbs and such with him, with us. We packed in advance just to make sure we're had all of our protective stuff there. Had activated charcoal, probiotics. Had a couple of herbal tinctures, which were great. And I brought some stuff myself, so I was able to knock it out and get on top of it fast. So feeling pretty good. How are we doing today, Evan?
I'm doing pretty well. How did TSA and all that? That go well? Do they bug you about your supplements?
I got global entry and TSA pre, and I got it for my son as well. So it's pretty easy for my wife and I to all to travel because we got that. And then that was nice.
Sweet.
Pretty good deal.
Cool. Well, life is good for me. We just got my daughter's stool test back. This is her third stool test in 2.5 years.
Uh-huh.
And we showed up with some bugs, and you and I were just looking at that. Her stools have been loose for at least a few weeks. And we did all the diet stuff, tweaking diet as much as we can, thinking that it could just be something like eggs, for example, which is a really common allergen for kids that she loves. It wasn't eggs though. It was these bugs. And so it's very important if you have a kid, doesn't matter whether your kid's 1 year old or 100 years old, your kid could still have gut bugs. And this is something that the pediatrician is not going to know about. And I know this, and Justin knows this as well, because we have parents reach out to us all the time. And
Right.
we don't really market ourselves as like pediatric functional medicine practitioners, but we've had to become that because these pediatricians are telling these people that the only option are antibiotics or other type of pharmaceutical drugs. And that's not necessary because we can fix these issues with herbs.
100%. So, like when I was in Mexico, for instance, we brought down some herbal tinctures. A couple of the ones that I love is Golden Seal. That's an excellent herbal tincture that it works phenomenal, along with higher dose berberines like berberine HCl, Oregon grape, barberry. These are great. So these are one of the things that I was using while I was down in Mexico. I was also using a lot of like burdock, also using a lot of grapefruit seed extract. These are really helpful. I also had a lot of silver as well. And silver is great because silver is actually a biofilm buster. So a lot of research on silver helping to knock down bacterial biofilms. And biofilms are like these protective shields the bacteria will use to prevent them from being attacked by the herbs or antibiotics. So the silver is really helpful for reducing biofilms. And because I got a mini cold from my son, having to put him down and such, you're just really in close quarters, and then flying, you're breathing in recycled air. I think my biggest stressor, anytime I get sick, it typically has a component of flying. And that's because you're in just a tube in the middle of the air, breathing recycled air the whole time. And you got people coughing, and then that gets recycled throughout the whole entire cabin. So in general, silver, Golden Seal, a lot of berberines. These are very, very powerful. And then my second biofilm buster is also ginger. So I'm going to jump on Instacart. I'm going to order some fresh ginger from my local Whole Foods, and I'm going to juice it up, run it through a French press, filter it out, add a little bit of honey and lime, and that's going to make an amazing ginger tea that I use for a lot of my patients for die-off. It's great for any other immune issues. And at the resort I was staying at, they were making me ginger tea as well, and it's very helpful.
Go through the logistics of making that again. You take your ginger, you cut it
Yeah,
up. You said you
you
put
can
it in a
do
blender.
2 to 3 pieces of it. So a couple ways you can do it. I mean, you can, if you have to, you can cut it up real thin and then add 12 ounces of hot water and then run it through a French press or a coffee filter. The best way is either going to be, you can grate it too. The best way is to juice it, either juice it or run it through a Vitamix or a Ninja, and then add the water, the 12 ounces of hot water. You want about 16 ounces total. So I feel like my clean canteen mug, if you will.
I've never juiced it before. I literally just take chunks and then put it in the bottom of the mug. And then when I get to the bottom of the cup, I just leave the chunks there.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get all of the active constituents that are trapped in the fiber, though. That's the big issue. So you blend it up or you juice it as ideal. You could grate it too, but that's a pain in the butt. And then once you get to the end, you're kind of like sawing your fingers
Right.
off. So I recommend juicing it or running it through a blender, like a high power blender.
Okay.
Add your hot water to it, and then add a little bit of your honey. And you can do Manuka honey, which is really good antibacterial, like a wild clover honey is fine. And then a little bit of lime, and then your cayenne's optional. And then you can put that, I recommend putting it in a French press. If you don't have a French press, you can just put it in some kind of a coffee pot. let it stew for 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then you can either pour it and run it through a coffee filter. So have a coffee filter and do like a pour over. That way it takes all of the fiber and the particulate out. So you're only taking in the active constituent. Or the easiest is a French press. And then you just press all the particulate out and then you only pour the juice out.
Oh, you know
really
what
nice.
I could have done too, which I haven't, would be I have one of those little stainless steel tea balls where you put the loose leaf tea in. I could just put the bits of ginger in one of those little stainless steel balls and like steep it in a cup with hot water.
You could do that. You just got to make sure that you blend it up really well, though. So you want to put all the active constituents in there.
I may get like a small blender. I've got a big blender. I mean, if I put 2 or 3 little chunks of ginger in there, that blender blade's not even going to hit it.
It depends how powerful it is. Like my Vitamix, no problem.
Even if it's just a couple pieces.
That's it. Yeah, no problem. I mean, the vitamin, dude, that thing, if you put your arm in there, it would freaking liquefy it. You know what I mean? That thing is, I think it's like a full horsepower.
It is.
You don't want to mess around with it, right? Yeah. So Vitamix or a Ninja or a Magic Bullet, I did it with a Bullet. That's still really good too.
Okay, I might get one. So
your cheaper option, just the Bullet.
Okay. So how we got on this subject was because what we were looking at on my daughter's GI map, she showed up with some Prevotella, which is interesting because we find that a lot in clients that have joint pain. We know 75% of people with RA actually have Prevotella infection. So if you fix the Prevotella, sometimes the joint pain goes away. Now, obviously, she's so little, she's not going to understand or be able to probably discuss joint pain to us, but it is there. And then also she showed up with a small amount of H. pylori, which some would argue as normal, but because of the virulence factors that we see, those are not good. But her inflammation was still low, which is good because a lot of times we see the inflammation goes high when you see virulence factors.
Yeah, you're referring to like the calprotectin that came back on her test?
Yep, it was fine. It was like a 27, so it's a little bit.
I still like that in single digits personally, so I'd want to knock that down. And again, if you get everything else down, it'll probably fix itself. And then the ginger tea would also help because that's really powerfully anti-inflammatory as well.
Yep. So we were talking about some, if people hear sounds in the background, they're like, what the heck is going on? People are working at Justin's house. So if you're hearing that, that's what's going on. But we were looking at her stool test result. We were coming up with a game plan. Now, kind of a couple options with the kids. I guess this is the finesse of using herbs is that, we were discussing using some kids strength formulas where they're kind of a weaker dilution of certain herbs, or you go with a higher strength, but is a lower amount. Now, just because kids, they're so light, she's 25 pounds. So we don't know exactly how she's going to do with a full strength, heavy hitting antimicrobial protocol. So what we've done so far is we've just started her on some kids formula at the appropriate dosing. Generally speaking, you're doing like a quarter of a dose for kids or maybe a third of a dose for kids. And then we're just going to try to graduate her up and see what happens. Now, what I noticed is, and what a lot of parents tell me is the same thing that I noticed, is that when you do start killing off infections in kids, you may see some symptoms that adults might not have. So for example, grinding of the teeth. I noticed she was grinding her teeth last night, but that was it. We haven't had any other issues in terms of like anger or irritability, because a lot of times mood issues happen when you start killing bugs too.
Exactly. Now with kids, one of the things we'll also do is some chewable probiotics. I mean, that can be phenomenal. There's a couple of brands that I use that work great. So chewable probiotics can help, especially ones that are higher in Saccharomyces boulardii. Can also help knock down some of the H. pylori. Also, higher dose lactobacillus and bifidobacter strains can also help as well. They can also help reduce inflammation.
Here was
all really beneficial things.
I want to probe you on this, and I'm sure people may want to hear this too. You've been doing probiotics for your son. I've been doing probiotics for my daughter, but yet on the normal bacteria category, all these beneficial bacteria, she still showed up low. Now, are you thinking that's just due to competition, or what else could be going on?
Well, number one, I mean, if you weren't giving it to her, the question is how much lower would it be, right? That's number one. Number two, there's some other not so nice bacteria there that could be crowding it out. So and she's also doing some antimicrobials. So, I think knocking down some of the not so good bacteria will be helpful. Getting the stool more solid and solidified again will be helpful. And then really focus on reinoculation, repopulation. And again, these bacteria aren't a forever kind of thing, right? But they'll kind of come in there and be transient within about a month's period.
Yep.
And then trying to add back in some fermented foods after, I think would be great. Slip in a little bit of kombucha if she can, or sauerkraut or some fermented foods, I think would be great.
Yeah, her face when I gave her a sip of kombucha, the ginger aid one, her face when she drank it was hilarious.
Yeah,
She wasn't a huge fan.
you could try the Cavita one. The Cavita one is a little bit of stevia sweetened in it,
Oh, okay.
and it's still relatively lower sugar, but it tastes a little bit sweeter because it's stevia sweetened. So that could be a good option too.
Okay. Okay. Good advice. Yeah. So we kind of jumped ahead and started talking about infections and herbs. Now we'll back up a little bit and let's talk about children and some of the signs and symptoms that your children may have an issue. We talked a little bit about the cognitive stuff. So I'll just kind of repeat some of that just in case. We're talking things that the parents may not notice that the teachers do notice at school. So this could be any like focus or concentration problems. This could be irritability. The kid could be angry. The kid could have outburst, emotional outbursts. They may have trouble controlling their emotions. I had one woman who had two 5-year-old twin boys. They were about to get kicked out of school because their behavior was so bad. And it turned out that they had a Clostridia infection. And Justin and I did a whole show on this about Clostridia and how it affects the brain. But these kids had to build up a dopamine. Their dopamine was off the charts. They're 5 years old. So all we did, we fixed the gut. The dopamine came back down on the retest. And the mom said, "What the heck did you do to my children?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, they're a different kid. Now they can actually sit still in their chair." And that was because we fixed the gut.
And that dopamine going high, was that from Clostridium? Like or is that just a stress response for the dopamine going high? What was the rationale behind that mechanism?
I mean, probably both, right? It's probably a combination of all of it, but we would point the biggest finger at the HPHPA marker that goes up. I believe on the Great Plains oat test, it's number 16. That's the Clostridia marker we look for.
Yeah.
And you and I did a show on this, but it's messing up that enzyme, dopamine beta hydroxylase. It makes you sound smart when you say it. That enzyme gets messed up due to Clostridia. The Clostridia inhibits the function of the enzyme, therefore dopamine gets built up.
So so the burning, because that's not like a marker of dopamine, but the burning of dopamine goes up really high, and it's affected by the not so good bacteria in the gut, or that Clostridium bacteria. And so what you're saying is, by getting the Clostridium down, you can have a major impact on dopamine metabolism, and that can affect mood and behavior too, right?
Oh, it's huge. So like I said, the lady emailed me, and she's like, "What did you do to my kid?" And then I go to read the rest of the email, and she's like, "Hey, this kid actually sits still. The teacher is so happy that the kid can focus now." So, before you go and you take your kid to a doctor that's going to put them on Ritalin or some other pharmaceutical drug to, quote, calm them down, you definitely want to recommend getting a stool test done. And this is something the pediatrician honestly might not know. Honestly, 98% of them aren't going to know how to run a GI map. They're not going to know how to interpret it, and they're not going to know how to make an herbal protocol to treat these issues. The only option for, conventionally is going to be, I mean, what would they do? I don't even know. Do they refer them to a gastro doc, or do they just prescribe the antibiotics themselves? What do you think?
Well, it depends. If they have a lot of bacterial issues, some of the more cutting edge ones will run a SIBO breath test. And if positive, they may recommend rifaximin or Xifaxan, which is the same thing, and neomycin.
Yeah.
Some may just diagnose her with IBSD, and then just give her on maybe some Imodium or some other, Metamucil or things to slow down the BMs and give it more solidity. So it just depends. Not all doctors are created equal on the conventional level.
Right.
So you really want to go on the functional side. Now, with your daughter's situation, I would also look at ruling out other food allergens. I know you are also feeding her, I think, a little bit of rice. And I would also look at potentially cutting out nuts and things like that. So I would tighten up the diet as like, a means of addressing the low-hanging fruit, because you don't want to be going through all this stuff. And, there kind of be like an on the fence kind of primal paleo food there that maybe we can pull out and see what happens.
Yeah, you're right. So we did pull out the rice. We were giving her some organic white rice, made it in a pressure cooker, which in theory helped reduce lectin content. So we did that once a week, but we pulled it out also almond butter. She loves almond butter. We pulled it out completely just because we thought, hey, maybe this is a factor. Still no positive improvement after removing those. So hopefully once we start knocking out these bugs, we're going to see some stuff happen, but it's not overnight.
Exactly. So what else can we do for the kiddos? So, I mean, of course, a paleo template's going to be a great starting point. A lot of the good fibers and the good carbohydrates in there are going to be very helpful for the gut microbiome. Cutting out the inflammation will be very helpful to the microbiome. We can also add in some fermentable carbohydrates afterwards, like the fructooligosaccharide kind of carbohydrates that help feed a lot of the beneficial bacteria, whether it's arabinolactone, larch tree, inulin, chicory root. Some of these are really helpful to help feed some of the beneficial flora. Again, if you get a lot of really bloated because of it, then we really have to go work through that fourth R, that remove R, right? First R, remove the bad food. Second R, replace the enzymes, acids. Third R, repair the gut lining, support the adrenals and hormones. Fourth R is remove the infections. Fifth R is repopulate, re-inoculate probiotics. So we got to do it in that order. If you start doing a lot of the fertilizer before you do the weeding, you got to pull the weeds before you drop down the seeds, and then you got to drop down the seeds before you fertilize. So think of the fertilizer as a lot of the prebiotic fibers that help the seeds grow. We weed, we seed, we fertilize, and the fertilizer is those prebiotic fibers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I'm going to take that statement a little further because this is why parents are confused. You know, they go to Whole Foods, they're trying to do the right thing for their kid. They go and they buy probiotics or they buy this and that formula for kids, and they don't see the results they're getting. And that's exactly what you're saying. You've got to do it in this order. You can go to Whole Foods or any place right now and buy consumer grade probiotics, which are not as good as the professional grade stuff we provide for our clients. Just got to note that quality is a huge issue. So you could go and buy something that says probiotics for kids, and maybe it's not good enough. Maybe there's extra fillers. Maybe there's maltodextrin and gelin gum and guar gum and a bunch of other crap that's stressing the child's digestive system, also reducing the availability and absorption of that product. So that's why you want to go really, really clean with the nutrients, but also it's not going to fix it. If you just put in probiotics, that alone is not going to get rid of parasites. My daughter showed up with a little bit of dentamoeba on there too. You can't get rid of that with just probiotics.
Yeah, and that level wasn't too bad. Now, again, with parenting and dealing with kids, I have a almost 15 months year old son. And, it's like a non-negotiable to eat bad food, right? It's just kind of like you don't negotiate with your kid to put on a seatbelt in the car. You don't negotiate with your kid to put on a helmet when they ride their bike, right? I kind of look at food as the same thing. Now, there may be some negotiables within that paleo template that we'll go to. So, for instance, on the vacation, my son was, a little bit sick, not doing good. So we compromised a little bit with peanut butter. Now, if I was at home, in my own house, I would have used almond butter instead. So that was a compromise. We compromised doing a little bit more easier fruit. So a little bit more watermelon and berries. His appetite was south a little bit, which happens when you get sick. We didn't have like chicken soup and bone broth. So we used some collagen peptides. We did some simple fruit. We did some simpler, easier to process kind of meats and such. So we did our best to handle that. We brought some green juice. I brought some collagen peptides, made a little smoothie for him to make it easier on his tummy. When you get sick, a lot of times you get nauseous, and that nausea is designed to decrease your food intake. There's some benefits with fasting helping to regenerate and increase your white blood cell and your immune cell population. So part of that nausea and that feeling is just, it's setting you up to fast a bit to help increase the immune system. Now, last night when we fed my son, he ate a whole bunch of, really good foods again. His appetite's back. So we had to compromise a little bit, but we did our best within that template. And then we didn't want to feed him any refined sugar, at least. We didn't want to feed him any grains. We did a pretty good job at that. So you got to just work with what you have. Always try to, good, better, best, and always try to find the healthier substitute if you have to switch.
Yeah, good point about the refined sugars and the grains, because all kids snacks, like if you go to like the kids section at the grocery, it's all grain. Even if it's organic, it's still all rice and wheat and barley and quinoa and hemp and amaranth. And it's not to say that those things have to be removed forever. Like maybe a little bit of hemp protein could provide some value, but generally speaking, we find that a lot of kids, especially, your son being as young as he is, his immune system and gut's probably not fully developed yet. So you don't want to put a bunch of grain in there.
Exactly. And we had pizza for dinner last night, and we were able to do a cauliflower pizza crust with a little bit of Daya almond cheese, and that worked out great. I mean, that's pretty good protein, very, very much on the lower carb side, and good proteins in there. I think there may be a tiny bit of rice within that pizza crust. It's mostly cauliflower and egg. But, within our cheat, that's a pretty darn good cheat if we're going to have pizza. So that's kind of like our way of substituting something in there that could be much worse.
You know, what's funny is a lot of these conventional pizza places, they actually have all gluten-free stuff now, like Pizza Hut, Papa John's. Everybody's going gluten-free. So that means our education is working.
Yeah. And, I don't want to consume a whole bunch of carbohydrate either, right? I want to still keep my carbohydrate in check, especially if I'm not exercising as much. I really got to be more careful with the carbs when you're more sedentary.
Yeah, let's go to some of the questions or comments on here. There's one on here from a person that said, everyone research the product Restore and Google Dr. Zach Bush will be a godsend for digestion issues. I had a client, and this is not the first. I've had probably half a dozen or more of clients who've been taking that product for a year. And this is supposed to seal up the tight junctions in the gut and fix leaky gut issues as a silver bullet. However, I've had female clients with their IgA so low that we know their gut barrier is not intact at all. And they were on that formula religiously for a year and it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the third R, right? The third R is repairing the gut lining, repairing the adrenals and the hormones. And if you don't go through the full 6R process, right? Remove the bad foods, first R. Second R, replace enzymes, acids, and your bile salts. Third R, repair the gut lining and the adrenals or hormones. Fourth R, remove the infections. Fifth R, repopulate. 6R, retest to make sure infections are gone. Sometimes on retest, we see new infections that were burrowed in deeper. So you got to work through that process. And that's why it makes sense that some people, I'm not saying the product's bad. I think it's a good product. It's a mineral kind of amino acid peptide that helps with the gut lining, but it may not be root causal because it's not being plugged into a comprehensive program. Part of the reason why functional medicine works and good practitioners get results more frequently than most is because they're working within a clinical framework where there's a whole journey here. We're not spotting and adding certain things in there to do patch jobs. We're working through an entire framework that's root cause based and system based, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, this is the same thing as if somebody's talked about some miracle probiotic, right? That would be skipping to, let's call it step 5 or R5, right? As opposed to this one, we're talking about restoring the gut lining. We're just skipping to step 3. So yes, there's a lot of stuff in every step of the way that could be a great silver bullet, but none of it works in isolation. So the order of operations, the whole product as a whole, you got to have all of it. Let's see what else there was here on questions. There's some stuff, but not really on the topic of guts, more stuff about hormones. Here's one from Gabe. He was asking his kids grind his teeth in the middle of the night. Thoughts? Yeah, I would say get your kid a stool test. I mean, it's very probable there's parasites or other issues going on. Also stress. And that could be like EMF stress, Wi-Fi in the house that's not turned off at night. It could be other stuff, but kids grinding their teeth. I've noticed like if we've had a stressful day where we run my daughter around, we're real busy running errands, trying to keep up with family, she may grind her teeth on those nights. So it could be a stress component.
Absolutely. Simple thing you can do to help improve parasympathetic function is put the mouth tape on. Put the mouth tape on. That forces you to breathe through your nose, which can increase the parasympathetic nervous system response, which is the rest and digest. So that's a really easy one off the bat. And then, of course, looking deeper at the gut for infections and parasites obviously is going to be really helpful. There's a technical term for grinding your teeth. I'm not sure what that term is. Yeah, bruxism, exactly. And that's associated with parasites. We know that. The research even says that.
Yeah, we see it all the time. And he also added here, Gabe had another comment. His kid has a lot of sugar cravings lately and very bad stool. So there's your answer. I guarantee there's a candida overgrowth as well.
Some yeast issues, and you got to cycle down, drop the carbohydrates down, or or at least shift to more whole food based carbs, at least lower sugar fruit, maybe a little bit of safer starch in there. It just depends on how good or bad the diet is. If they're a younger kid and they're pretty active, I just sub out the carbs for whole food carbs. That's the easier way to go.
I would, in terms of supplements, I would be doing some liver support, some adrenal support for kids can even be done, like some Eleuthero or some Siberian ginseng, and then also get the stool test because there's probably candida and or parasites.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Well, anything else here, Evan, you want to address today?
Yeah, one other comment here. Someone said they have to wear a night guard every night due to the damage they've done to their teeth from grinding and clenching so badly. Get your gut looked at. I used to grind my teeth. My wife told me about it all the time. She said, you grinded your teeth all night last night. And I run the stool test and look, there's the infections. Now I no longer do that.
Now, still, if you have that issue, feel free and use a mouth guard just so you don't grind that teeth away, right? But make sure you get to the root cause, right? Obviously, the mouth guard's not going to be the root cause, but use it in the meantime because it's not going to have much side effects. It's not like a medication that's going to have a lot of negative effects. So continue to use that while you investigate and get to the root cause and work through those full 6 R's. But regarding the kiddos, we're going to use the ginger tea. We're going to use some herbal formulas that are going to be dosed according to their weight and ideally are going to be reasonably palatable if they can't swallow pills. We're going to add in the right probiotics. We're going to add in some biofilm busters, and we're going to make changes in the diet. And we're going to work within, what the parents can do. But we want to make sure, right? I want to get kind of parents' heads wrapped around this. Your kid's eating bad. You're not going to negotiate your kid with the seatbelt or a helmet riding their bike, right? Most parents would probably say no. Same thing with food. And we may find a healthier substitute that gives your kid what they want, but doesn't put them in a position to feel like crap, or let's just say get a lot of poor nutrition in, like let's say pasta, right? You used to eating a lot of pasta. Well, you can go to something like zucchini noodles. You can go to something like miracle noodles as well, and then just use a really good fat-based cream on there to give it a lot of taste, like either some ghee or some coconut cream stuff. There's some really good things out there. So there's always a substitute for whatever your kid is addicted to, and try to ease them over to that. And of course, the solution is just don't ever open up Pandora's box, right? If your kids never know it, it's there. It's always easier. But, you know, most people I see, they've already opened up Pandora's box. We just want to find that healthier substitute. We don't want to go to removal mode. We want to go to substitute mode. People always feel better when they're substituting versus removing.
Here's a funny story, and then we got to go. We took my daughter to the zoo. They had a little Halloween event not too long ago, and you mentioned the whole Pandora's box thing. So you go around to these little booths, right? And they give out little candy or snacks or treats or pencils or whatever for kids, right? You take your little Halloween bucket and run around. Every single booth we went to, you know, we took, most of the time we just said, no thanks, keep it. But a couple times we let them throw like a bag of Skittles or like a Twix bar or something in the Halloween basket. My daughter didn't even know what it was. She wasn't even interested at all. And then we get to a point where they give us like an Annie's organic granola bar. And she knew exactly what it was. And she says, bar. That's the only thing she was interested in. The rest of the candy, she didn't even look at. It didn't even exist to her.
That's funny. Yeah, when we went trick-or-treating, we didn't do too much because my son's not quite walking yet. But, I mean, we already have the plan already dialed in. We have some high-quality, darker chocolate things. The Justin's darker chocolate peanut butter cups or some higher dark chocolate kind of things that are organic. And, hey, here's the Halloween candy. That's going to go to the homeless shelter, and we're going to just swap out bags. And then you can pick, you know, one or two things a night out of the healthier bag with lower sugar and more antioxidants and not all the GMO high fructose corn syrup. Because remember, most of that candy is going to have high fructose corn syrup. It's going to come from GMO corn, which is going to have a whole bunch of Roundup residue, which is not going to be good for their gut lining. Part of the reason why gluten sensitivity is so prolific in today's environment. I think a lot of people are postulating, Stephanie Seneff out of MIT's also said this too, is that the gut microbiome is being altered negatively by the Roundup glyphosate pesticide, and that's having an impact, increasing gluten sensitivity.
Yep. And go check out that podcast. I did a podcast with her. You should interview her too, Justin, if you haven't. Just type in like Evan Brand Stephanie or Evan Brand Stephanie GMO. We did a good podcast on that, why she believes we're seeing such a very, very sharp increase in autism too. So we'll wrap this thing up. But if you want to reach out to Justin or myself, our websites are justinhealth.com, and you can go schedule a consult. Justin works with kids all the time. I do too. My website's evanbrand.com. And we would love to help you and share this information, spread it, give it to your pediatrician. You know, let them know that there's an alternative option and the antibiotics are not the first thing that we want to go to. We now know research is proving there's permanent DNA damage and permanent DNA changes and methylation changes after using antibiotics. So if we can prevent these kids that, you know, before age 5 or 6, so many of these kids are getting put on antibiotics. I'd love to prevent that and get them on herbs instead, because we've seen the before and after. We've got the lab results to prove it. You can successfully eradicate these problems with using natural medicine. So this is not alternative medicine. This is what existed before the drugs did.
Totally. And did my summary of what Stephanie Seneff said sound right?
It did, yeah. That the increase in the Roundup is damaging the gut barrier, which is changing how we're reacting to foods. Yes, it was perfectly clear, and
Perfect.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. So, like I said, there's more to that story if people want to hear it, and then you should probably interview her because she's a cool lady to talk to.
Yeah, now that my summit's done, people head over to Thyroid Reset Summit. My summit will be coming out this winter, end of the winter, early spring. So really excited for that. So we'll have more live interviews on my podcast. Give us a share, give us a thumbs up, head over to evanbrand.com. You need more support or help. Feel free and follow the links there. Also head over to justinhealth.com for more support and help. We get reinvigorated, guys, by your sharing, by your comments. And it makes us want to work harder to get more info to help improve all y'all's lives. So thank you so much. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, alert. Anything else, Evan, you want to add?
No, that's it. Hope you all are well. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. You take care. Bye now.
Take care.
Bye,
See you
y'all.
later.
Bye.